Your new title will be Compliance Intern. I stared at the email. James Crawford, 52 years old, 20 years in financial compliance, and some 29-year-old kid who'd been here 6 weeks just made me an intern. The subject line was worse. Role transition, effective Monday, no meeting, no explanation. Just a digital slap across the face at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. I set my coffee down and read it again. Same words, same insult. My daughter's college tuition was due in 3 months. I had 12 years left on my mortgage and 13 years until I could think about retirement. This wasn't the time for corporate games. But here's what Nathan Pierce didn't understand about me. 20 years in this business teaches you patience, real patience, the kind that waits for the right moment instead of throwing tantrums in conference rooms. Let me back up. Pacific Securities Group used to be a compliance nightmare before I took over. We were bleeding audit flags, treating Basel III requirements like suggestions, and one junior analyst had a panic attack during a FINRA examination. Fast forward 7 years under my watch, and we'd become the gold standard. Regulators used our secure trace system in training seminars. We sailed through 3 separate audits because our documentation was bulletproof. I built that system from nothing. Every protocol, every verification step, every fail-safe. When something went wrong, a whistleblower alert, a liability clause gone sideways, a vendor contract that looked like it was written by someone's nephew. Guess who got the 2 a.m. call? Me. And I never complained because I understood something most people don't. Quiet control beats loud chaos every time. My office was tucked between IT and facilities. Nothing fancy. But I had the admin credentials, the architectural documentation, the metadata timestamps, and more importantly, the trust of legal, finance, and 4 departments that knew better than to touch a compliance setting without running it by me first. You know what's underrated? Being the guy who actually knows how the machine works while everyone else fights over who gets to stand in front of it. I've watched 3 economic downturns, seen compliance frameworks evolve from basic checklists to AI-powered risk assessment platforms. The real power isn't in the corner office, it's in the server logs that keep everyone out of federal prison. The first warning sign came as a Slack message 3 weeks earlier. Can we chat? Quick sync on compliance workflows, reorg stuff. It was from Nathan Pierce, our new VP of Operations. Nathan looked like he'd stepped out of a LinkedIn ad and talked like he'd swallowed a startup accelerator. 6 weeks on the job and he thought he'd invented business. I walked into his office. He didn't look up, just waved toward a chair like I was there to fix his printer. So I've been reviewing your area, he said, spinning a stress ball. We're looking to modernize some functions. Get leaner, more agile. What do you need? I asked. Nathan smiled like he'd practiced it. Just exploring. Some roles might get consolidated. You've been here, what, a while? 7 years? He nodded. Right. Legacy systems. Lots of overlap these days. We'll loop you in as we finalize. I left without blinking, but my gut shifted. Not fear, suspicion. The kind you develop after watching corporate politics play out for 2 decades. The next week, I was asked to share my system access credentials with his assistant for backup purposes. I forwarded the login info but created a read-only sandbox clone instead. Let him click around in circles. 2 days later, legal pinged me for help with an export compliance protocol I'd written. I said sure, then realized Nathan had already tried to rewrite it. Badly. He'd removed 3 verification checkpoints and left the liability triggers wide open. I fixed it quietly, no fuss, but the writing was on the wall. Around the same time, merger rumors started circulating. Whispers about Fortress Capital Partners sniffing around, Fortune 50 private equity with deep pockets. I didn't pay much attention. I had systems to maintain, AML protocols to update, a new KYC verification map to finish. Besides, I'd already documented everything, including who accessed what, when, why, and whether they had any business doing so. I wasn't planning to use those logs, but when you build systems that actually work, they work for you when you need them. The first time Nathan spoke to me like I was a Best Buy employee, I let it slide. He strolled past my desk, didn't stop, didn't make eye contact, and dropped a post-it on my keyboard. Need data on vendor renewal risk. Bullet points. CEO wants simple. No please, no context, no clue what he was actually asking for. Look, I've played this game long enough to know when someone's trying to muscle their way through a power grab. You don't go nuclear when the shark first circles. You watch, you document, you wait for blood in the water. But Nathan didn't wait. By the following week, I noticed he'd removed me from the compliance planning calendar invites. His assistant, a woman who once asked me how to pronounce fiduciary, was listed instead. Then came the shared drives. Files I'd created, maintained, and backed up for 7 years were suddenly duplicated under folders named Ops Central with tags like updated by N. Pierce. Updated? More like lobotomized. He'd stripped out audit notes, removed regulatory cross-references, and flattened 3-tier verification checks into one blanket sign-off by operations. No compliance officer worth their certification would have approved it. It wasn't a system, it was a suggestion box duct-taped to a dumpster fire. When I brought it up politely in our next one-on-one, he blinked at me like I'd spoken in COBOL. "James," he said, fake sincerity cranked to 11, "I think maybe you're a little too close to this stuff. It's not that it's bad, it's just dense. We need scalable, agile frameworks." "Scalable frameworks," I repeated. "You mean removing verification steps for vendor liability across multiple jurisdictions? That's not agile. That's a $2.8 million regulatory violation waiting to walk through our lobby." He smiled that smug little smile. "Trust the process. It's all being handled. Meeting over." I walked out, didn't say anything else. Then came the HR reorganization slide deck. I wasn't even invited to the meeting. My buddy in payroll forwarded the file with a "you didn't get this from me" subject line. There it was on the org chart. Compliance folded under operations. My name wasn't listed as head of anything, just senior analyst, consulting. Nathan's name was at the top, VP Operations and Compliance Integration. Integration. That's what they were calling it. I pinged legal quietly, asked if they'd seen the change. They hadn't. Then someone from IT let slip that my admin permissions were being reviewed. Routine audit, they said. Except my admin logs were cleaner than a Mormon's browser history. Things got weirder. My building access badge got downgraded. I had to get buzzed onto my own floor by the facility's intern. The cafeteria card I'd used every Tuesday for 7 years suddenly stopped working. I found an empty conference room, locked the door, and opened my private archive. Cross-checked timestamps, and watched in real time as files I'd written were being duplicated, renamed, and credited to Nathan's team. Not edited, not improved, just stripped and watermarked with "updated for Modern Ops Initiative." The final insult came in that Friday email. Effective Monday, you'll transition to support role under operations until reclassification is finalized. Support role. 7 years of late-night documentation sessions, federal compliance updates, and keeping this place out of regulatory hot water. And I was being shuffled to the intern pool. I stared at the screen, didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't even reply. I just opened a new document and typed, "Intellectual Property Documentation, J. Crawford, Original System Architecture, Secure Trace v1.0. I saved it to my encrypted drive. Then I went for a walk. Not to calm down, to think. Because the moment you realize they're trying to erase you is the exact moment you start writing the ending they don't see coming. Monday's demotion meeting was a masterpiece of corporate cowardice. 3 people in the room: Nathan, a glossy HR rep named Rachel Murphy, and some guy from talent optimization who looked like he'd been frozen in a WeWork since 2016. Nathan kicked it off with the enthusiasm of a man unveiling a timeshare scam. "James, first off, we want to recognize the tremendous work you've done. You've built a real foundation here, and that doesn't go unnoticed. But as part of our new agile realignment, we're evolving some of the existing roles to better serve operational flexibility." He paused like he expected applause. I could feel the corporate poison in the air, passive-aggressive word salad they serve when they're too cowardly to say, "We're gutting your role and giving it to someone's nephew." I waited. Let the silence bloom. Rachel chimed in, "Your new title will be Compliance Intern. You'll be reporting to Austin in operations." She said it like she was offering me a cruise. Austin. 24 years old, fresh off a 6-month certificate program in risk innovation, and once told me he thought GDPR was database software. Austin was going to be my boss. "No pay cut, technically," Rachel added. "It's just a repositioning. The org chart is flattening." Flattening. Right. I folded my hands. Do I retain system-level access? Nathan cleared his throat. Actually, we've reassigned those credentials for now for security and onboarding alignment. Translation, we're locking you out before you can burn the place down. That's when I knew they weren't just pushing me aside, they were trying to erase me, take what I'd built, claim it as their own, and leave me rotting in the basement. I stood up. No raised voice, no scene. Thanks for the clarity. Nathan blinked. Any questions? Nope, I said. It's nice when things are finally spelled out. I walked straight out. Past marketing where some intern was filming a TikTok. Past accounting where Kathy gave me that confused look. Straight to my desk. I had one box under my desk, pre-labeled because somewhere deep down I knew this day was coming. I didn't take much. My notebook, my backup drive, one coffee mug that read, "Trust me." I read the fine print, and a sealed manila envelope I'd prepared weeks ago labeled "Legal," IP rights documentation, Secure Trace v1.0 architecture. I slipped it into the internal mail bin, addressed to legal counsel. No return name, no note. Let the records show I gave them one chance to do the right thing. They declined. My badge wouldn't even let me into the elevator. I got in my car, drove 1 block away, parked in the library lot, and pulled out my phone. I logged into the Mirror backup server they didn't know existed. The one I'd set up 6 months ago after I caught Nathan poking around in file histories he had no business accessing. Everything was still there. The real documentation, the original architecture, the update history, and the line of code I'd left at the very bottom of the original schematic file. /J Crawford Secure Trace v1.0 author 11/15/2017. Do not alter without full attribution. My hands were steady. If they wanted to play games, fine. But they'd forgotten one thing. I didn't build a compliance system to follow orders. I built it to protect what matters. The first crack didn't show up in some dramatic whistleblower leak. It showed up as a missing decimal point. That's how fragile Nathan's stolen system was. 1 decimal point missing from a Basel III capital ratio reference triggered a review request from Fortress Capital's legal team. Just a simple, polite email. Hi Nathan, confirming whether this ratio references Q4 2023 or Q1 2024 standards. There seems to be a discrepancy between your footnotes and the audit trail flags. Nathan, of course, didn't know because Nathan didn't write it. But Nathan did what Nathan does. He bluffed. All intentional, he replied. Dynamic calculations, agile methodology. I'll have our documentation lead confirm. Which was funny because the documentation lead he was referring to was Austin, who once asked legal if FINRA was a type of cryptocurrency. At the all-hands meeting that week, Nathan stood under a slideshow of shiny logos and merger terms and announced with toothpaste commercial confidence, "We're in serious acquisition talks. Big opportunity here, Fortune 50 buyer. And the buyer's team is already impressed with the operational overhaul we've implemented, especially our compliance infrastructure." He said he hadn't just duct-taped my life's work to a PowerPoint template. I wasn't there, of course. I'd been scrubbed from the org chart, wiped from the mailing lists, buried under reorganization buzzwords. But absence has weight, and by the time Fortress Legal got their hands on the documentation, things started humming with static. The version Nathan sent them was his modern ops stack, stripped of all traceable authorship, half the verification logic yanked out because it slowed approvals, and the other half duplicated across irrelevant workflows like compliance-themed Mad Libs. On the surface, it looked impressive. Color-coded charts, bold fonts, enough buzzwords to choke a consultant. But the second they ran it through their automated audit simulator, it flagged 34 inconsistencies in under 3 minutes. Most were small, technical, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But one was a missing clause about cross-border transaction reporting that had previously saved the company from a $2.8 million AML violation. Gone. Erased in Nathan's agile simplification sprint. Here's the thing about buyer-side legal teams. They don't like ambiguity. They don't like "we'll get back to you." They definitely don't like systems that generate conflicting regulatory compliance paths depending on which tab you're viewing. A quiet Slack channel was created. #Fortress questions. Inside, a thread called Secure Trace Original Author. Confirm. The file name had survived, buried deep in the metadata of one of the oldest version logs. Not something Nathan would know how to scrub. Certainly not something Austin would catch between LinkedIn learning modules and motivational quote Mondays. At first, they thought maybe it was a typo or placeholder, but then they cross-referenced it against the audit report logs. The timestamps matched perfectly with the period when compliance violations had dropped to 0. Then they checked the employee database and found James Crawford listed as senior compliance architect during that time frame, but not listed anywhere in current operations. And that's the second crack, because buyer-side legal isn't stupid. They've seen this before. A company slaps fresh paint on a broken framework, cuts the architect out of the picture, then tries to sell the house at premium pricing. But buyers don't just acquire systems, they acquire people. And when one of those people mysteriously disappears and the system starts showing stress fractures the moment real questions get asked, they start digging. They always dig. Suddenly, Nathan's weekly sync calls started running long. Suddenly, Fortress Legal began requesting original file histories, original author documentation, original compliance review records, and someone, maybe a paralegal, maybe an intern who used to process those legal mail drops, remembered the envelope. The one marked legal, IP rights documentation. It hadn't been touched, hadn't even been properly logged, until now. I didn't know any of this was happening. I didn't need to, because when a system is built right, its silence does all the talking. The acquisition briefing started with champagne and ended with a body count. It was supposed to be a victory lap, a glossy, catered formality where Fortress Legal shook hands, nodded through the deck, and greenlit the 8-figure merger that would make Nathan look like a Silicon Valley genius in business casual. The room was staged like a magazine spread. Stainless steel carafes, leather-bound briefing packets, a slideshow preloaded with phrases like synergy and operational maturity. Nathan sat at the head of the table, wearing that executive smirk like it was part of his uniform. Austin flanked him, tapping nervously at his tablet, pretending he understood what was in the binder in front of him. Fortress Counsel arrived exactly on time. 3 of them, led by a man named Harrison Wells, who had the kind of stillness you only develop after decades of watching powerful people hang themselves with their own rope. They didn't waste time. "Thank you for the materials," Wells said, flipping open his leather folio. "We've reviewed your compliance system documentation." A few questions came up. Nathan nodded, all swagger and teeth. "Of course, fire away. Our system's rock solid. Built it from scratch with our new operational framework." Wells raised an eyebrow. "Interesting, because according to the metadata on your version control logs, the foundational architecture appears to have been authored under J. Crawford Secure Trace v1.0. And that file name aligns precisely with the only period where your internal audits came back completely clean." He said it plainly, no emphasis, just dropped it into the room like a bomb. The air thinned. Austin blinked. Nathan chuckled nervously. "Oh, that's probably just a legacy placeholder. We've completely overhauled the structure." Wells didn't look away. "Odd, because after that timestamp, your variance rate climbed steadily." "Tell me, who is J. Crawford?" Silence. Nathan's face twitched. He was part of a transitional team, no longer with the company. "Part of a transitional team," Wells repeated slowly. "And was he at any point demoted before leaving?" It landed like a gunshot. Nathan's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Austin went pale. Wells nodded slowly and set his packet down. "I'll be clear. The foundation of your compliance framework, the very thing we're investing in, appears to be authored by someone who is no longer here, who has not been credited, and whose absence correlates directly with system degradation." He turned to his associate. "We need to speak with Mr. Crawford directly." Nathan tried to speak, but Wells cut him off. "Without direct clarification from the original architect, our legal team is advising we pause the acquisition. We have serious concerns around intellectual property, authorship, and potential misrepresentation." Then Wells reached into his folio and slid a document across the table. It was a printout of my original schematic. At the bottom, in clean sans serif font, was the line I'd embedded 7 years ago. Authored by J. Crawford, Secure Trace v1.0, proprietary IP registered 11/15/2017. Nathan stared at it like it was poison. Wells stood, buttoned his jacket, and delivered the final blow. "We expect a call from Mr. Crawford within 48 hours. If he's unwilling to discuss terms, then this entire acquisition is based on a compromised asset." They walked out without another word, leaving Nathan, Austin, and half the executive team blinking in the wreckage. The call came at 7:42 a.m. No caller ID, just a silent vibration while I sipped coffee. I let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, a follow-up text. Mr. Crawford, this is Harrison Wells with Fortress Legal confidential discussion request, available today. No emojis, no fluff, just business. I tapped the number and hit call. Wells answered on the second ring. Mr. Crawford, thank you for your time. We've reviewed your original system architecture. Impressive work. His tone was precise, like every syllable was vetted by legal. We'd like to schedule a confidential call today. Our compliance leads plus one technical auditor. Who else will be on the line? No one from Pacific Securities. This is discreet. I paused. I'll be on in 20. They used a secure platform, the kind that doesn't save recordings. I logged in, mic off, camera off, just my initials in a corner. The feed filled with 3 profiles. Names appeared. Wells, R. Singh, Audit, D. Lee, GRC led. Mr. Crawford, Singh began, we'd like you to walk us through the design principles behind Secure Trace v1.0, specifically the verification logic that's been flagged in recent reviews. I started slow. Hierarchy triggers, jurisdictional logic, 3-tier fallback verification, the process Nathan's team had gutted to a single checkbox. They asked good questions, real ones. Why did you flag cross-border vendors under dual jurisdiction instead of assumed primary? Because EU standards were shifting, I replied. I built in anticipatory logic for regulatory changes. What about the delay protocol under Section 4B? That's a circuit breaker. It stalls execution if the audit trail shows more than 5 edits in a 30-day window, designed to prevent tampering. Dead silence. Then, that function isn't in the current system. No, I said. Nathan removed it. Lee unmuted. You left a comment in the original schema file, line 173. I nodded. Read it. He did. If this loop is removed, liability buffer is compromised. If someone strips this out, they don't understand what they're protecting. Another silence. Deeper this time. Wells leaned in. We'd like to proceed with the acquisition, but there's a condition. Our recommendation is to proceed only if you, James Crawford, agree to serve as global head of compliance for the merged entity. Not would you like to. Not we're offering. Only if. I let the weight hang. I'll need full system authority. No intermediaries. Granted. Direct audit channel access. Yes. I pick my own team. Of course. And I wanted in writing that the original architecture was authored by me. Wells's voice didn't flinch. We've already drafted the language. Attribution clause is on page 3. A soft chime. Document upload. I opened it. The system known as Secure Trace v1.0 was authored, developed, and implemented by James Crawford during his tenure as senior compliance architect. I didn't smile. Not yet. You understand what this means for the existing operations team? We do, Wells said flatly. And frankly, we don't care. We don't want what they built. We want what you built, and we want you. I leaned back. A cardinal landed on my deck railing. I'll see you at the next meeting, I said, and ended the call. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a corner office with windows that actually open, running global compliance for a Fortune 50 company. My team reports directly to me. My systems are untouchable, and every quarter, when the audit reports come back clean, I think about that moment when Nathan thought he could erase 20 years of experience with a few PowerPoint slides. They wanted the system. Turns out, I was the system all along.